Now, in this regard, I'm very honored to introduce our first speaker, Congressman Brad Sherman, who hails from my home state. More important, he has long served on the Subcommittee on Terrorism, Nonproliferation and Trade, both in a ranking and chairman capacity. He, along with Ros-Lehtinen, is responsible for legislation focusing on future agreements and new requirements, referred to as H.R. 1280. More important, he serves with distinction on focusing on issues in the Middle East. He also sits on the Subcommittee on Asia and the Pacific. And if anybody was watching, he was asking questions of the Secretary yesterday. I watched. So, with no further ado, Congressman.
Hello, I'm Brad Sherman from California's best named city, Sherman Oaks. With me here is my foreign policy advisor, committee staff, and chief of staff, at least 3 jobs, only 1 salary, Don McDonald. The way we divide up work in our office is Don does all the thinking, the analysis, and the decision making. And my job is to stand behind podiums and look pretty. I think I do that well. But this presentation should just be the beginning of a dialogue. If you want us to keep you informed about the things we're doing or our perspective, give Don your card. And you can always drop him a line. Is it Don McDonald or Donald McDonald? Don. Don.mcdonald@mail.house.gov. I've got really 2 intertwined topics here. One is Iran, and the other is the bill formerly known as H.R. 1280, and what our policy should be with countries other than Iran. I was going to try to keep those 2 topics separate, but they've kind of blended together. The event that Henry points out in 1957 shows that we need to do everything possible to prevent violations of the Non-Proliferation Treaty's system, whether we're dealing with the Shah or whether we're dealing with the Revolutionary Guard Corps. Governments come and go, but the states that sign the NPT need to be held to it. As for those hearings yesterday, the press, of course, and most of the hearings focuses on the differences. There was a heated difference within a narrow range. Almost everybody in that room was not focused on taking military action nor taking anything off the table. Everyone there agreed we shouldn't adopt new sanctions laws effective now. Everyone agreed we should have new sanctions laws effective, if necessary, 6, 7, 12 months down the road. And the disagreement pretty much focused, and everybody agreed, and I think this is important, it's something that Iran does not agree with, that existing sanctions laws should be carried out according to their terms. And new entities discovered to have violated or triggered our sanctions laws should be listed and sanctioned. So the disagreement related to under what circumstances should additional statutory action be taken at some point down the road. There are 3 sub-issues there. One is, but it all comes down to who makes the decision. If Congress passes a law that's triggered under certain events, Congress makes the decision. If Congress locks into our schedule that the House and Senate will vote on a particular bill on some day in July, then Congress makes the decision. The strong preference of the administration is for the administration to make the decision. And the decisions are threefold. First, by what time should suitable progress be made? This is an agreement that's supposed to last 6 months, but it can be extended by its own terms, by mutual agreement. And it's a agreement that lasts 6 months, starting from some future date. So it lasts 7, 8, 10 months from when it was negotiated. So the first issue is at what time should the new by which time do we have to make suitable progress? The second definition is what is suitable progress, or what is an acceptable final agreement. And the third is how tough will sanctions be if by a particular time we do not make a particular amount of progress. So all the disagreement in that room was, do we wait for the day and the time when the administration says, we've had enough, we want more statutory sanctions, or does Congress set a date, make a decision, and determine what those sanctions will be? As a practical matter, if we wait until 6 months after the future date when the agreement becomes effective, Congress will not be able to act over administration opposition, because the administration has some juice on this hill, until probably about a year from now. The congressional schedule is such that if you don't do anything by July, you're really not going to do it until December of next year. The United States Nuclear Cooperation Statute, basically our export control statute, hasn't been changed significantly since the 70s. The dispersal of enrichment and reprocessing technology has made possible the deploying and development of these bomb-making technologies under the guise of civilian programs, and that's a real option for a host of countries around the world. And I'm convinced that if Iran is successful in getting a nuclear weapons capacity, that will inspire others not only in its home region, but around the world. What we have now is every state with nuclear weapons is either unique, or in the case of Pakistan, has an ongoing conflict with another nuclear state. And, well, when I say unique, you've got the countries that didn't sign the NPT, you've got the countries that signed the NPT as nuclear states, you've got North Korea, which is not a trendsetter or a country that anybody wants to emulate or views that their country is similar to. And then you have Iran, a country without particular geopolitical risks, a country of medium size, medium income, and if medium income, medium sized countries with medium degrees of national security concerns are going to have nuclear weapons or nuclear weapons capacities, how do you stand up in Brazil or Argentina or Nigeria and say it's not appropriate for our state to have that same level of power? So countries that have existing nuclear energy programs have built stockpiles that we have to be concerned about. The NPT bargain has frayed with regard to not only Iran but North Korea. And we have got to have an expectation that violations of the NPT will be faced with strong and immediate response. Everybody talks about sanctions so much, they think that we've had sanctions on Iran for a long time, just because we talked about them for a long time. We passed a bill in 1996 that we never enforced, and that had nothing to do with Iran's nuclear program. And when we became aware of Iran's nuclear program, we did absolutely nothing until 2010. That's 8 years when the public knew about the program, and we did nothing until we passed CISADA. I think if the message goes out that for the first 8 years when your nuclear weapons program is public knowledge, there will be no new sanctions on your country, a lot of countries are going to think that the Iranian model is one they can emulate. And so I think the best way to prevent new Irans is to be tough on the existing Iran and to learn from the mistakes of how Iran was allowed to go this far. I will say that if we are not successful with our current negotiations with Iran, if God forbid they do develop nuclear weapons, everybody will discuss which play should have been called toward the end of the fourth quarter. What we should have done in December 2013. If we lose this game, it's because we were asleep for the first 3 quarters of the game. We did nothing. 2002, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There are very few games that can be won. The Lakers are learning this. If you go to sleep during the first 3 quarters of the game. So we have to make sure that our response to violations of the NPT structure are immediate, severe, and learn from our Iran mistake. Another element in effective policy is to leverage our own nuclear cooperation agreements. These agreements can and have encouraged countries not to develop and deploy, whether indigenously or through acquisitions, enrichment and reprocessing technologies. The 1, 2, 3 agreements that we sign with other countries either need to meet what in 1978 they thought was the gold standard, I'm now calling it the silver standard, or they have to get approved by Congress. Now, in 2009, we created the new gold standard, the United Emirates standard, and that is the standard that will be enshrined in the next iteration of H.R. 1280. Prevention of enrichment, intrusive inspections, a requirement for the additional protocol, and importantly in the original text of this bill, liability protection. Because the purpose of a 1, 2, 3 agreement, it's not just part of our proliferation policy, it's also part of our trade and economic policy. And when French and Russian companies have sovereign immunity, American companies need the equivalent, otherwise we're engaging in all this diplomatic effort in order to create jobs for companies overseas. And so we want to encourage this new gold standard. Now, some feel that, and the structure of the bill is, you either meet this new gold standard or you need congressional authority to adopt the 1, 2, 3 agreement. There are those that say that getting congressional acceptance of a 1, 2, 3 agreement, you might as well not even try. The fact is, we approve not just in one statutory action, but 2, the 1, 2, 3 agreement with India. So it is not true that requiring congressional approval of an agreement is the same as discarding the agreement. So in terms of preventing new Irans, we need a policy to deal with Iran itself that shows we're serious, at least starting in 2010. We need to learn from that mistake and respond vigorously to other violations of the nonproliferation structure. And we need 1, 2, 3 agreements that encourage countries to adopt, as the UAE has adopted, a no enrichment, additional protocol structure with the liability protections that give us a fair shot at the jobs. So I look forward to working with everybody here, and I know Don and I look forward to learning more from your comments. Thank you very much. I'll take 1 or 2 questions.
There you go.
If they're easy.
If they're easy, there you go.
Yeah.
So what makes you think that the U.S. can control this trade when there's other people that have the same technologies today? It's not 1956 anymore.
Good question. We've got to do our best. It's clear that if we don't get the liability protection, we're not in a position where our economic interests are much at stake in any case. So bargaining for that liability protection is essential for us to have an economic stake in the development of nuclear energy. I think that we can get buy-in from many of the others in the nuclear suppliers group. And as the India situation demonstrates, an awful lot of countries feel that having the agreement with the United States is important. If a country is ideologically driven to have a nuclear weapon, it's going the benefits of having a 1, 2, 3 agreement with the United States pale compared to the impediment that would pose to developing that nuclear weapon. If the state simply wants the most efficient generation of electricity and good economic relations with the country that everybody wants to have good economic relations with, then a 1, 2, 3 agreement makes sense. So certainly H.R. 1280 would not convince the Supreme Leader that he really doesn't want a nuclear weapon. On the other hand, I think there are a lot of countries that will go in that direction. Yeah.
Excuse me, Jack Spence with the Heritage Foundation. So understanding what you just said is that H.R. 1280 wouldn't prevent Iran, because if you're ideologically driven to do that...
Well, it would have in 1957, assuming...
It's not now, it's...
Well, yeah, I don't have H.R. 1280 is not going to prevent Tehran from developing nuclear weapons.
I mean,
yeah.
Right. Maybe I misunderstood you. Right. I thought you just said that if a country is ideologically driven to build a nuclear weapon, then these sorts of things probably won't stop them. But what they will do, without question, I would argue, is put additional burden on legitimate economic commerce between friendly countries. So given that we have a fairly in-depth and detailed nuclear export regime already in place that prevents us from just enriching out willy-nilly anyway, I don't really see how the new H.R. 1280, having not seen the new one yet, helps fix the Iran and North Korea problem without creating undue burden on the commercial.
I think Iran is a good illustration. We entered into nuclear cooperation with a friendly government, which at the time did not seem hell-bent on developing a nuclear weapon. I mean, give all things being equal, that was one of the things in the Shah's wish list, but I wouldn't call that government ideologically determined to have a nuclear weapon above all else. Had we had an effective 1, 2, 3 agreement with the Shah along the lines of 1280, then when the new government took power, it would have been starting from a lower base. With every country, those that sign up, we wouldn't want to sign a 1, 2, 3 agreement with a country that was ideologically driven to have a nuclear weapon. With those countries that at the present time are looking for effective generation of electricity and harmonious economic relations in general, I think they will sign a gold standard agreement. And then if the regime change, if situations change, if a neighbor develops a nuclear weapon or a neighbor develops a strong conventional military force and calculus changes and they kind of prefer to have a nuclear weapon, they will have signed a 1, 2, 3 agreement with the United States. They will have have signed the additional protocol, etc. A 1280 doesn't work for North Korea and Iran. It would never be signed or deal with the North Korea or Iran, but it might very well deal with those governments as aggressive or not aggressive, as friendly or unfriendly as, say, the Shah was in 1957. I'll take one more question over here.
Yes, Stephanie Cook with Nuclear Intelligence Weekly.
Yeah.
The administration has been kind of widely reported to be, announcing or at least promulgating a policy which is essentially keeping in place what it's already doing, which is going in the opposite direction from what you're suggesting, which is to go back to the original model for NCAs, which didn't include a provision on ENR, and if that is the case, and I don't know, they keep, there's word that it's imminent that they're going to announce this, doesn't it put you directly at loggerheads with what they want to do? And do you think, what do you give your chances of getting 1280, a new version, such as you described, through the whole of Congress?
We've only passed 57 bills all year, half of them renamed post offices. None of them establish a new paradigm for nuclear cooperation agreements. No one, and you got 100 speeches being given around here talking about this bill or that bill. Nobody's got over a 50% chance of getting their bill passed, except for the guy that's trying to change the name of a post office. He's got a good shot. Again, a lot of this is not what should the policy of the United States be, but who should make the decision. And that is exactly what this bill is doing. It's saying, the administration agrees with the gold standard. Hey, they like the UAE agreement. They'd love to get that in every agreement.
But they know they won't.
Well, I think the policy of the United States is we want that, at times we'll get it, and at times we'll think of accepting less. The only question is, on those occasions when a decision has to be made, should we accept less? Should there be a congressional vote, or should the decision be made by unelected bureaucrats with some limited time invested by the only elected member of the administration?
And 1280 will require a group
when you don't meet the gold standard, yeah. So it's, again, who makes the decision is an important part of what the ultimate policy will be. Just as the rules are the same, the policy's the same for what's a strike and what's a ball, but who's the umpire and calling them can make a big impact. But again, don't overlook the agreements with the administration. We all agree we're going to try to achieve the higher standard. We all agree that we will, on occasions, consider an agreement that fails to meet that standard. And the only question is the process and decision-making entity for when you accept an agreement that doesn't quite come up to your objectives. Thank you very much.
I think what we've learned from this presentation is we need to be very careful and watch every postal agreement from here on out and see what's attached to it.
What should the name of the bill be, Henry?
Post Office 101.
HR 1280.
Yes.
This is just a post office bill.
By the way, I think it is a mistake just to focus on the question of legislation. One of the things that people have not looked at is this interim agreement. And as I say, as someone who's critical of it, I still find it's worth looking at because there are things in it that are remarkably firm, and you sort of wonder what the thinking was behind it and whether they can back into their brief and explain it with regard to principles. If they did, it would probably have to apply more in the case of Iran and more than just the case of Iran. There's a piece that Victor Galinsky and I wrote about extracting the principles that are in the agreement, both the ones we think they're sound and the ones we think they're unsound. It was put out by the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. You can get a copy out there of that. And the point here is thinking about what we think safe and dangerous is very important. This interim agreement is the first time the 5 original members, weapon states, okay,